Just earlier in the stream, we were talking about Shadow of War and how the end game was so crazy grindy because it was built for you spending money through loot boxes that it almost destroyed the game. And then later they stripped the loot boxes out, but it's still kind of grindy and feels kind of weird. But either way, it's still a solid game. Well, that studio is a team called Monolith. Shadow of War released in 2017, okay? Have you guys played their recent game? No, you haven't, because they haven't released anything since then. They've been working on a Wonder Woman game ever since 2017. And what's interesting is in the, 2017 was a weird era. And it's always funny to me when everybody's like, oh, we're entering the gaming crash, the industry's crashing, blah, blah, blah. Like everybody always says that, but they conveniently forget like all of the other crazy things that have happened in years past that were just as bad, if not worse at the time, like for the context of where they were. Because 2017 was such an insane year. We had two colossal flops that not just did damage to the studio and the brand and all of that, but they also did damage into the mainstream stock and reputation of the companies. The two examples in this case were, of course, Warner Brothers with Shadow of War and the loot boxes that they did there that we'll touch on more in a second, and Battlefront 2. Battlefront 2 had these things called star cards, which was how you leveled up your characters in the game. And so it was like literally pay to win. If you spend more money on star cards, which were sold through these star card packs, just loot boxes, you could have a significantly better character than everybody else who didn't pay money. And it was in like a competitive FPS, or I guess at times third person shooter, whatever, you know what I mean? And it got so bad, I believe it was the government of Belgium. They investigated them. The EU started investigating EA as a result of this, and this started to reflect very poorly on Disney because Disney has a certain reputation and brand to uphold, despite the fact that they're kind of like the definition of a soulless corporation. They have a reputation to uphold that they're not that. They have to keep those Disney adults thinking that they actually do care. And so Disney got really upset. In fact, there was a story about how Disney reached out directly to the CEO of EA, a guy that still is in control, Andrew Wilson, and basically slapped him upside the back of the head and said, stop this. This is looking really bad on us. There's talks of government investigations on all that. Like, what are we doing? Funny side note. Do you know who was specifically rumored to potentially take over a very powerful and significant company? Yeah, the same guy, Andrew Wilson. A story just late last year that Andrew Wilson was being eyed to replace Bob Iger as CEO of Disney. Interesting, right? So it all comes full circle, man. It all comes full circle. So even though they were very upset with him back in 2017 for how bad it made them look, they took the loot boxes out of both Shadow of War and Battlefront. The star cards remained, but they remain like motivated by gameplay or something. But if you had already bought them, you still were way ahead of everybody. It was a mess. But it was so bad that it was not just concentrated in the gaming sphere. It also spread out into the mainstream. People on like MSNBC and Bloomberg Financial News were talking about loot boxes and loot crates and how they could be investigated and banned in all of gaming, because this is the other important piece. The second investigators and specifically regulators get involved with the gaming industry, these guys know their loot boxes, all those like gotcha mechanics, those do not stand a very good chance at staying around. And that represents billions of dollars a year. Okay. So they don't even really care that much about Battlefront 2 or Shadow of War's loot boxes and loot crates. What they care about is the loot boxes and loot crates elsewhere that print money for them, which is why they couldn't stand the idea of government regulators getting involved, which is why immediately Disney was like, shut it down, EA, shut it down, because if the regulator comes in and says, no more loot boxes, full stop, period, then they're screwed. Like you would see EA go bankrupt, no joke, because that's all of like the FC games, Madden, all of that is built around those monetization mechanics and, or surprise mechanics, as they say. And so they could not afford to let that happen, which is why the second there were rumblings of regulator interference, they immediately started playing nice, right? But 2017, crazy year. And after the blowback that came with the loot boxes in Battlefront and in Shadow of War, because Shadow of War was built in a way where you get about 30, 40 hours into the game, and then you were at the end game. But in order to reach the true ending of the game, you had to have all these legendary grade orcs. And those legendary orcs could be bought with real money. And it was, people did math, and it would take like hundreds, if not thousands of hours to grind for legendary orcs, or you could spend $1,200 or whatever it was in order to just buy your way there. It was egregious, and they knew what they were doing. The entire game was built around pushing you into spending money that way, even though it was a single player game. And it was a really gross and disappointing abuse of the Nemesis system, which was a brilliant gameplay mechanic and system that they, of course, patented so other studios couldn't use it. But it's just a tale of greed and a game that was built around that excessive monetization. Which I remember back in 2017, it was a hot button issue, and it still is a hot button issue even now, because if you want to monetize your game, people are not, I don't think people are not inherently against that. Like if you have an amazing game and then you sell a DLC for it, that's fine. The problem is if your game suffers as a result of your pursuit to monetize it greedily, at that point, like, you shouldn't be surprised when people don't like the game, because your monetization interfered with the quality of it, which it certainly did in these cases. But all of this builds us to the titular topic for today, which is the Warner Brothers video game division has been facing significant issues. This is a report from Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg. Insert joke about Jason Schreier here. I know some people hate him, but either way, we're going to talk about it because he has sources in here. In January, Warner Brothers Discovery revealed that David Haddad, head of the struggling video game division, would be stepping down. To some who work closely with the veteran executive, the news didn't come as a surprise. Their only question was why it had taken so long. Warner Brothers Games had just suffered through a dismal year marked by a $200 million write-down in May on a painful flop, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, followed a few months later by a $100 million write-down due to the failures of Harry Potter Quidditch Champions and the fighting game Multiverses. Funnily enough, Quidditch Champions is pretty much the sole reason why there is not Quidditch in Hogwarts Legacy. You remember you're playing through it and they're like, what was the excuse? They were like, oh, the Quidditch pit is down for repairs, or the team is traveling. What was the excuse? Do you guys remember? I just remember rolling my eyes when I heard it because it was a Quidditch injury. Is that really what it was? An injury on the pitch. It was like hilariously contrived, but it was because they had this other game in the works, and they, like, the executive said, no, if you have Quidditch in Hogwarts Legacy, why would you need to play our live service version of it? You wouldn't. That could interfere with it. So no. But Quidditch Champions has, I mean, this is not a big surprise. It's not exactly a Rocket League. And it's not a Rocket League, not because like the devs didn't do a fine job, which from what I can tell, they did a fine job. It's just that Quidditch is a game invented by a woman who doesn't know anything about sports or what makes a good sport. And so it makes no sense at all. And it's not like, it can look cool in a movie, I guess, or in a book form. But when you actually break it down and try to turn it into a competitive sport, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't work that well. And that's, I mean, it just doesn't work. And Multiverses, I mean, what else can you say that hasn't been said? It's just, it's a mess. It's a mess. Okay. They've spent so much money, so much time trying to turn that into a thing, and it's just not. It's just not. But as you can see, Warner Brothers Chief Executive Officer David Zaslav has told investors in November that the company's video game business was substantially underperforming its potential. I would agree, but not for the reason he thinks. Okay, not for the reason he thinks. With access to a bounty of popular entertainment franchises like Batman, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones, Warner Brothers video game division should be able to compete with industry titans such as Take-Two Interactive and EA. The unit employs more than 2,000 people across a dozen subsidiaries with offices across the world. The problem is, and I'm sure he's going to get to it, they have this belief that because they have these big IP, they should be able to turn all of it into live service successes that print money, like mobile games and things like that, which they probably can. They probably can get there eventually, but I just don't think they know what players actually want. You know, and Suicide Squad is a prime example of that. And Quidditch Champions is a prime example of that. You know, these are all things, if you asked your typical gamer, does this concept make sense? They would tell you, no. If they had hired me to come in and look at these projects 5 years ago, I would have been like, no. You're doing what with the Rocksteady devs? What? Are you insane? We all would have said that, because an actual like gamer can identify a flop very, very quickly. But these executives, again, the story of the PS5 era really has been executives thinking you can have a successful studio that's successful at single player games, make a live service game that will be just as successful. They don't understand that they're different talents, that the audiences are different. The assumption has just been that it's all the same. And that's just not true. Naughty Dog, really good at single player games, whether you love them or hate them. I mean, they're clearly critically acclaimed. But Naughty Dog doesn't make live service games. And their fans don't want a live service game. Rocksteady, they made an amazing trilogy of Arkham games. None of their fans want a looter shooter. None of the devs are like equipped to make a live service looter shooter. But the executives think, no, you made a game of the year last year, just make a game of the year looter shooter. That makes us tons of money. They just don't understand, because a lot of these executives did not start in the gaming field. They started in the business field, you know, on the flip side, managing spreadsheets and stuff. And so they just don't know what they're talking about. They just don't, you know, it's a different animal. It's like that old story of, was it Jeffrey Katzenberger? When he came in, was it him? I forget who. It was one of the Disney execs in like the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And he came in and looked over, I think it was the Black Cauldron, whatever movie. And the edit of the movie, like the movie was kind of scary. It was pretty dark and like not that child friendly. And he thought it was totally inappropriate. He thought it was a total disaster. And so he just said, just re-edit it. Cut this scene and maybe extend this scene with some extra footage you have. And they're like, sir, it's an animated movie. Like, we'd have to go draw and do stuff. Katzenberg, did I say Katzenberger? No, I was close, off by a few letters. But it's because he came from TV. And with a TV background, his understanding was like, oh, you just have extra footage and deleted scenes, and some scenes are longer. He's like, just re-edit it. But you can't do that in an animated movie when everything is drawn and animated. Like, it just doesn't work. We animate what we need to, not a bunch of extra stuff. Like, what are you talking about? And that's the same kind of thing going on here, is that it's people that don't understand the medium in which they're working, trying to tell people who work in that medium what to do. And it just doesn't make sense. I'm not a construction guy, I said construction guy. That should tell you everything you need to know. I don't work in construction. If you ask me to like frame a new room or to pour a concrete foundation, I would have no idea what I'm doing. I don't work in that field. I don't know what I'm doing. But if you then promoted me to be in charge of the people doing that work, it also wouldn't really make sense, because if I'm like, just pour the concrete faster, use a little bit less so we save money, you'd be like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, you know, you'd be freaking out because it doesn't make any sense. They go on, but Haddad's tenure has left major gaps in its portfolio that will likely persist for the next year or two, according to people familiar with the business. The company had been counting on Suicide Squad and Multiverses to generate revenue throughout this year, but instead has ended support for both games. In the wake of its miscalculation, Warner Brothers has little to release in the stretch ahead, beyond a refreshed version of 2023's hit Hogwarts Legacy and a Lego title with a few mobile games. Yeah, there's still allegedly a director's cut coming for Hogwarts Legacy. We don't really know when. They, of course, just did the mod update kind of out of nowhere. And so we'll see when the director's cut lands. Who knows? But The Lego title, mobile games, that stuff's still in the works, but those are not exactly like the heaviest of hitters. So they definitely have made some oopsies. The interesting thing is this guy, David Haddad, he was the guy in charge of all the video game division. And what's interesting about him is that he had made statements about the need for single player games, diversity in their portfolio, stuff like that. Basically, don't just make live service games. Have a little bit of single player, have some mobile games, have live service, like shake it up. What we've heard from David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, he said that they want to utilize their IP and everything should be a live service. And they think there's tons of opportunities to create shared experiences through these IP. So the thought was David Haddad maybe was one of the few people that was still pushing for single player stuff like Hogwarts Legacy. And now that he's gone, maybe it's all, no hands or no holds barred. Everything is just a free for all and they're just going to turn everything live service. But we don't know. Maybe his departure will be a really good thing because he did greenlight and lead them to the success with Hogwarts Legacy. But he also was the same guy that thought Suicide Squad was a good idea, that thought Quidditch Champions would pop off and be the next Rocket League. He thought Multiverses would take down Smash Bros, which of course all is just wrong. So maybe his departure actually ultimately is a good thing. As they continue, one of the company's biggest bets in development, a video game based on Wonder Woman, has struggled to coalesce, according to people familiar with the project. Earlier last year, it was rebooted and switched directors. The game has already cost more than $100 million, said the people who asked not to be identified, discussing non-public information, and is still years away from release, if it ever makes it to market. JB Perrette, Warner Brothers head of games and global streaming, said in an interview that the company remains bullish on video games and that he will take a larger role in the division as the company looks for Haddad's successor. Quote, "We'll get right back to profitability in 2025. We won't get back to the profitability we want to get back to in the next 2 to 3 years." I believe that. "You will take 2 to 3 years to rebuild, reset to levels we want to be at, but the bounce back is immediate as far as going from loss making to profitability." This is where it gets interesting. According to interviews with 24 current and former Warner Brothers employees, a lack of strong, cohesive vision during Haddad's reign, a tumultuous period in which Warner Brothers struggled through multiple reorganizations, led to years of ineffectual, trend-chasing, wasted development time. Along the way, once revered studios under the Warner Brothers umbrella have taken reputational hits, lost key staff members, and burned through hundreds of millions of dollars. This is exactly the problem with their direction, is that they've pretty much destroyed Rocksteady as a developer. All of the big name devs and team members are gone. So now it's not even the team that made Arkham Knight, it's the team that made Suicide Squad. So they're not anywhere near as valuable of a team as they once were, naturally. And then Monolith has also struggled to do anything, and so they've been hemorrhaging talent. The only team that has seen significant improvement and success, of course, has been Avalanche, behind Hogwarts Legacy. They describe some of Haddad's stuff. So colleagues described him as a polished executive who does not appear to spend much time playing video games himself, something subordinates occasionally found challenging as they tried to talk through the nuances of product decisions. Staff also griped that it could take months to receive answers to their questions on matters big and small, ranging from a studio's next game to whether they would participate in the annual E3 trade conference. Haddad declined to comment. So, I mean, standard executive that doesn't really do a whole lot. At subsidiaries such as Warner Brothers Games Montreal and Monolith Productions, Warner Brothers Games Montreal, they did the Gotham Knights game, Batman Arkham Origins. Monolith did the Nemesis System games. Staff members felt stuck in limbo as they waited for decisions from Haddad and his team. The executives in Burbank may have felt pressure to avoid making big calls at the time because the entire organization was beset with uncertainty. Shortly after Haddad started, the division's parent company was purchased by telecom giant AT&T, triggering a lengthy antitrust trial, and then, before long, spun out to merge with Discovery Inc. The corporate shakeups left heads spinning, generated constant buzz that the video game division might be for sale. And this is part of the problem is, for years, there's been rumblings that maybe they were going to sell their gaming division, which means the studios, the IP related, or at least the rights to the IP, stuff like that. And if you're planning to sell, you probably don't want to make a lot of huge moves and greenlight a bunch of expenditures. Like, I'm running into this in my house because we're not going to be in this house forever, probably not even for particularly long. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, I could spend money on renovating the bathrooms. So if we did that, bathroom remodels, I could spend money doing landscaping in the backyard, right? But if I'm just going to sell it right now and not enjoy any of those upgrades, and I'm probably not going to get my money back totally on those investments, why would I greenlight that? So if I plan to sell the house in a year, why would I spend a bunch of money, thousands and thousands of dollars on this other stuff if I'm not going to get all that money back and it's just going to be basically a gift to the next guy? So that's kind of where they land, is that they just don't want to rock the boat too much. Loxy, I mean, sure, but it's really easy to just point at the guy leaving as a sole reason for failures by Warner Brothers. Yeah, I mean, and without a doubt, I think one of the biggest problems that a lot of these big corporations is thinking, again, that like, just because you had success at one particular type of company or in this one division does not mean that that translates into gaming. They think that it will, but it just doesn't. As you can see, like Haddad, a Harvard Business School graduate, spent the early part of his career at toy and entertainment companies, joined Warner Brothers Games in 2013, became head of division 2 years later. So he's been in charge since like 2015. Again, he greenlit Hogwarts Legacy. That was his project that found amazing success. But he also was behind like Shadow of War, Suicide Squad, and Gotham Knights, and all these other disasters that they've had. So you could point to one good thing, or maybe even a couple good things, but there's also been a lot of disasters under his leadership. So I can understand the theory that maybe he was the last bastion of hope for single player games under their leadership, but he also has not exactly had a great track record for a while. What's going to be more telling is who they replace him with. If they replace him with just another Jim Ryan type of guy, nothing will change. It'll probably get worse, and they probably will sell the gaming division. But I mean, time will tell with that one. As they go on, there was a lot going on politically within the organization, said Martin Carrier, the former head of Warner Bros. Games Montreal. The focus on games was perhaps lost a bit. By 2023, the landscape appeared to be stabilizing, and Zaslav was citing the company's video game business as a unique strength compared to other top film studios. While Sony Group Corp has a significant video game hardware and software business, other Hollywood rivals have largely gotten out of the field, preferring to license their film and TV properties to outside developers, collecting royalties and eliminating much of the financial risk at a time when the cost of making games has soared. Eventually, Warner Brothers could decide to emulate Walt Disney Co. and license more of its franchises to external companies. Quote, this from an analyst, I think we'll see more licenses get farmed out to experienced developers, while the remaining Warner Brothers game studios are left to focus on things they're good at, which I think this makes the most sense. If you want to do live service, hire a live service company and studio to do it. If you want to do that, focus on the expertise. You know, if you've got ZeniMax or something and you greenlight ZeniMax Online Studios, they're already working on a game, but I'm just using them as an example of a developer, and they make MMOs, pay them to make a Hogwarts Legacy or a Hogwarts type MMO. Don't have Avalanche try to do it. If you want to do a Batman looter shooter, hire a looter shooter studio and team to do it. Do a tighter scope and do that. That's the key, is to have people who are good at this, do that. People who are good at this other thing, do that. Keep everybody happy. I think that's the key. They go on to describe a little bit more detail about Monolith, which I wonder if he's going to mention the thing I'm going to bring up, because there's an interesting little tidbit here. So they've already mentioned that they rebooted development on this Wonder Woman game early last year, I believe was the exact statement. Yeah, early last year it was rebooted and switched directors. So bear that in mind. Early 2024 it was rebooted. We'll come back to it. Monolith, based in Kirkland, Washington, was once a darling of Warner Brothers Gaming Group thanks to the hit 2014 game Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, one of my favorites of all time. It's so good. A sequel released in 2017 did well, yet failed to surpass the first title. Afterwards, the studio began working on a brand new franchise that would experiment with procedural storytelling. But executives at Warner Brothers weren't particularly interested in creating new characters and universes from scratch, according to people familiar with the discussions. They suggested to Monolith's crew that they should attach the project to one of the company's many established franchises, such as Game of Thrones or something in the DC Comics portfolio. The devs, who had won critical acclaim with Shadow Mordor's unique narrative system, in which fallen enemies could come back to life with memory of the protagonist's actions, struggled to graft another existing franchise onto their nascent ideas. The game plodded along for more than 3 years in something of a standoff where executives at Warner Brothers appeared to know it wasn't going to happen, but did not take decisive action. In 2021, Warner Brothers finally canceled it. The head of Monolith, Kevin Stevens, not related to me, unfortunately, and most of his directors quit and started a new studio with rival EA. The remaining staff soon pivoted to a game based on Wonder Woman comic books. So already you see 4 years of time wasted. The directors and the head honchos, head of Monolith, and most of his directors leave because they're not happy with the direction they're being forced to go. They said, we didn't want to do a Wonder Woman game. We didn't want to do that. We're upset. If you really want to do this, we're going to leave. And so they left. So now, again, you see a lot of the lead talent behind those Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War games. A lot of that key talent's gone. They continue. It has now been more than 7 years since the studio's last game. An initial version of Wonder Woman tried reimagining the Nemesis system with the game's namesake heroine befriending enemies. What? Let me read that again. An initial version of Wonder Woman tried reimagining the Nemesis system with the game's namesake heroine befriending enemies. I swear to God, what is it with every one of these games being about friendship? The jokes write themselves. Like, yeah, it's literally a frenemy system. Instead of a nemesis system, it's a friendsinesis system. Like, it literally is a friendship simulator. To be clear, they pivoted away from that, but that's where they started in 2021. This worries me because if they thought that was a good idea, if they thought that that's what gamers would like, that demonstrates a disconnect that's pretty severe. I can only imagine the disappointed sigh and outrage that would emit from the theater when they would reveal that the Wonder Woman game was about befriending enemies and creating friends. And that's what they were doing with the Nemesis system. I can only imagine, dude. Oh my God. That's crazy. So after that, they tossed out that idea in favor of a more traditional action adventure game. So they might not even be using the Nemesis system. An initial version of the Wonder Woman game tried reimagining the Nemesis system with the game's namesake heroine befriending enemies, but that idea has since been tossed out in favor of a more traditional action adventure game. It might not even have the Nemesis system, dude. The new version. Imagine how disappointing that would be if we got this game from Monolith after all these years. It's probably going to be a decade between releases when they finally get this thing out, if it's not canceled. And imagine if after all that time they just didn't do anything with the Nemesis system. What a disappointment that would be. Now, Wonder Woman's fate remains in question, according to people familiar with the business, because of challenges following the changes in Monolith's leadership and issues surrounding the game's technology. So I've actually spoken to 2 people that have worked on Wonder Woman, and they both cited issues with the tech, specifically getting the new version of the Nemesis system working, because they did engine changes, they moved, and it just wasn't coming together. It wasn't working right. And so at least I can back up that point, that the 2 people I've spoken to have said that, yeah, there were a lot of technical problems on the back end. But what's interesting about this, remember, they said that they rebooted this in early 2021. What other stuff was happening, or early 2024, not 2021. Sorry, I read something. What other stuff was being said around 2024, early 2024? David Zaslav, CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, was insisting that he wanted to make the most of their IP, that he wanted to create shared experiences, turn it into like live service stuff that generates money long term. He said that in early 2024, going into mid 2024, even in the face of Suicide Squad's disastrous launch, he said, still, we have a lot of potential here. That's what we need to do. The Wonder Woman game was rebooted in early 2024. Something happened in November of 2023. There was a report from WCCF Tech. In the midst of Warner Brothers vowing to double down on games as a service, live service stuff, the Wonder Woman game had a job posting that mentioned specifically the desire to hire people with experience in this realm. This is what David Zaslav said specifically around this time. Our focus is on transforming our biggest franchises from largely console and PC based with 3 to 4 year release schedules to include more always on gameplay through live services, multi-platform and free to play extensions, with the goal to have more players spending more time and money on more platforms. Ultimately, we want to drive engagement and monetization of longer cycles at higher levels. We have specific capabilities. We are currently under scale and see significant opportunity to generate greater post-purchase revenue. This is what they were saying right before, okay? In this same era. And this job posting that they brought up, specifically, it said that they were looking for software engineers for gameplay on the Wonder Woman game that had experience in, quote, helping maintain a live software product or game. Now, what was interesting is in November, they came back out and they insisted, this is the follow-up. In response to this article from WCCF Tech, Warner Brothers actually came out and said to IGN, Wonder Woman is a single-player action-adventure game set in a dynamic open world. This third-person experience will allow players to become Diana of Themyscira, I don't know, and introduce an original story set in the DC universe while also featuring the Nemesis system. Wonder Woman is not being designed as a live service. This was posted and updated November 17th. When was it rebooted? Early 2024. So, just a couple months after they deny that it's live service, even though they're hiring for people with experience in live service stuff, live operations. And even though their CEO is saying, we see opportunities, not currently in November of 23, not currently being utilized to monetize these things. So we see opportunity. It's possible in early 2024, he took action to take advantage of that opportunity he saw. In other words, I think it's very, very possible that Wonder Woman was rebooted in early 2024. A new director was placed on it, and they decided to pursue a more live service offering. Because I've seen people point to this denial of it being live service in the last 12 hours or whatever it's been. People pointing to this being like, no, they said it wasn't live service. They said it wasn't live service in November of 2023. It was rebooted in early 2024 with a brand new director, a new direction, and the CEO saying that they want to turn everything live service. So that was an effing lie. It might not have been a lie at the time. In November of 2023, I don't think it was a live service game. But I think there's a really good chance that after it was rebooted in early 2024, the new version may be. Because every sign, all the smoke is billowing. And when there's a lot of smoke, typically there's a fire. You know, could be a pivot. Yeah. So this worries me a lot. And considering the team that's been tasked with rebooting it is the same team that thought using the Nemesis system to literally create a friendship system. That does not make me feel like this is destined for greatness. Maybe it is. I love the Nemesis system. I love Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of War I found frustrating. It's got, it's a solid game now after all the patches and stuff. It's still weirdly hollow at the end. Alan, if they're $100 million deep, how many copies would they have to sell to come out even? That's the problem with this. This is the same problem Dragon Age Veilguard ran into. with these development hell situations and reboots, you reach a point where you can't break even. You can just minimize losses. Dragon Age Veilguard seeking 3 million units, that would not have even broken even. Like that wasn't enough. Even with everybody buying full price copies, that wouldn't cover it. But it would minimize the losses. And with this, at some point they're gonna have to be like, do we just try to minimize losses, get this out, and then figure out what the next project is? I mean, that's all they really can do. But they just started early last year on this new vision. Corbin, thank you for the 5. Why did Warner Brothers not write these games off instead of ACME versus Acme versus Coyote? Why reboot Wonder Woman without the Nemesis system? Just how? So to be clear, they are being, I think you mean like colloquially, why don't they write them off? They are being written off, you know, in the books financially. But why didn't they just call it quits and do something totally different? I think the thing is this, that's why I don't think that this reboot is like a little adjustment. I don't think they're like, okay, this version of the Wonder Woman open world single player game isn't working, so let's just try again and tweak it and just do something slightly different. I think a reboot is something transformational. It got a new director. That's not a small shift. I mean, they're looking for somebody to take the game in a totally different direction. And the only direction we've heard them say they want to go is live service, monetize it, more post-purchase revenue, all that stuff. So doesn't instill a lot of confidence. Because even if they were to cancel the game fully and they're like, okay, Wonder Woman's dead, shut it down. Even if they were to do that, what's the next step? The next step is like what? Shut the studio down? Green light another Shadow of Earth, Shadow of Middle Earth, a Shadow of, I don't even know what they'd call it, but what do they green light there? I mean, the people that made those games so good have left. The directors all left. The head of the studio left. You know? So we'll see what happens with Wonder Woman. But after hearing all this, I went from being like, oh, I'm excited to see what they've been cooking, to I have a bad feeling about this. So maybe that makes me a cynical prick, but I feel like there's things to look at and inform that opinion. Okay, so we just talked about the Wonder Woman game and how I think there's a bajillion red flags around that now. News that they wanted to rework the Nemesis system in the original version of the game into a friendship system. I'm not joking. They wanted to have it so Wonder Woman befriends enemies and they use the Nemesis system to simulate friendships. I cannot believe that was real, but that's what they wanted to do. But now that we've talked about that, if you've not seen that Luke Stevens live clip, go watch that one. But now we are here in the latter part of the article to talk about Warner Brothers Games Montreal, Avalanche, Rocksteady. Specifically, I'm interested in like the Rocksteady bits, but let's touch on this. So Warner Brothers Games Montreal, which helmed 2013's Batman Arkham Origins, supported other projects, is one of the biggest pieces in Warner Brothers' collection of gaming assets. In late 2016, not long after Haddad took over control of the division, the studio received a new mandate. At the time, successive titles such as Grand Theft Auto Online and Destiny, which generated recurring revenue streams long after release by convincing players to spend money on in-game purchases, was ramping up the pressure on executives across the industry to push for their own live service games. At Warner Brothers, the favored buzzword became digitally powered. Oh, go F yourself. What a stupid term. You can just imagine in a conference room, we don't like using live service or loot boxes. No, that's gross. We prefer digitally powered. Dry up. How dare you? How dare you? What are you talking about? What does that even mean exactly? Like powered by digits? It's electronically powered, as is everything. What are you talking about? Oh my God. People give like Apple crap because Apple tries to do their like own marketing spin on stuff. At least theirs kind of makes sense. Like they didn't want to just say AI for their phones. So they're like, it's Apple intelligence. It's also like, shut up, Apple. Shut up. It's AI. Like, we know what it is. Okay, stop trying to make it your own thing. But at least that makes sense. You're like, oh, it's intelligence within Apple devices. That at least I can connect the dots. Digitally powered? What the hell does that even mean, bro? Like, anyway, I'm getting worked up. The Montreal studio, sorry, I mispronounced it. The Montreal, you just don't enunciate anything in French. The Montreal studio began working on a new live service Batman game that it hoped would freshen up the franchise by ditching Bruce Wayne. Ooh. Freshen up is a word. Halfway, or a few words actually, two to be specific. I'm going to move on. Halfway through development, as it struggled to make progress on the new project, the studio dropped the live service component. In 2022, it released Gotham Knights, which went on to receive mediocre reviews and generate tepid sales. What did I tell you? What did I tell you? The inventory system in Arkham Knight, or in Gotham Knights, was so hilariously bad. You remember this menu? It just looked like a mobile game. Yeah, Gear System explained. Don't be tricked from Not the Winner Gaming. This whole thing looked like a mobile game. All of the crafting was tied to these currencies and in like different crafting materials that you would have. And it was just so needlessly complicated and insane. And the other thing about this game was that there were a bajillion outfits and cosmetics, like a hilarious number for each of the characters, which normally would be a really good thing, but you could tell it had been built to sell you those cosmetics. And the only reason they were all included in the game was because they had pivoted away from the microtransactions. Yeah, as you can see, salvage required. I guarantee you that they were going to sell you like loot boxes, loot packs with these currencies inside. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. 1000%. They were going to sell this to you. They were going to sell the cosmetic aspect to you. 1000%. Wow, look at that. Oh my God. I forgot how mind-numbing the inventory stuff was in this game. But it's because it was built, I'm pretty damn sure, to just sell you all this stuff. Oh, you want a level 16 suit mod chip? Well, you got to do some polls. I guarantee you that's what they were going to do, dude. Guarantee you. So they pivoted away from that. Thank God. The game could have been even worse. And they would release Gotham Knights to mediocre reviews. Yeah, it also had one of the most like roll your eyes ending ever. It was really stupid. Even so, based on the hard-earned lessons from the previous development cycle and equipped with new proven technology, the Montreal studio leaders wanted to make another iteration of Gotham Knights, a 1.5 version that would fix some of its predecessor's flaws. But their bosses nixed the idea, according to people familiar with the plans, and instead assigned the bulk of Montreal's staff to help out with other projects across Warner Brothers. In the months that followed, the Montreal studio continued trying to get a new project off the ground. First, they pitched a game based on the comic book anti-hero John Constantine, who was played by Keanu Reeves in the 2005 feature film. Dude, that sounds badass. That would be super cool if they could do that. Imagine if they even got Keanu to voice it and do motion capture for it. That'd be crazy cool. That'd be really cool. Haddad's team, led by Vice President of Production Ben Bell, initially said they were excited about the idea, but when asked for budget and timeline approvals, they remained non-committal. Shocker, according to people familiar with the plans. After months of waffling, Bell suggested that they should work instead on a game starring a more recognizable character, like the Joker or the Flash. They chose to go with the superhero speedster, but in 2023, Warner Brothers released Flash, a lavish movie starring Ezra Miller, which bombed at the box office. The video game has since been scrapped. Oh, wow. Just imagine, because Ezra Miller's out there beating strangers up in the street outside nightclubs and stuff. These poor people in Montreal have to have their entire project scrapped. Dude, that's insane. That's crazy, dude. What a stupid reason to have your project demolished. You just come into work one day. It's like, what happened? Ezra Miller is beating people up, so we're all out of a job. It's just like, God damn it. Oh my God. Over the past 2 years, most of their leadership have resigned, not just because of the lack of new games, but also due to frustration with their corporate bosses, according to people familiar with the events. Now, the Montreal studio is helping out with other projects such as Wonder Woman while working on a pitch for a new game based on Game of Thrones. So they're not even working on their own game. They're working on Wonder Woman, helping with that, and then they're working on a pitch. What a waste, dude. What an absolute waste. That's remarkable. That's crazy. Man, this is why in the games industry, so much of this, like so much of just the industry in general, is about finding talent and retaining it. Like, it's not just about putting out like a solid financially performing game. You have to find talent, retain it, preserve it, attract it, like new talent. Because the moment that you start to have those experienced devs and the people that know what they're doing, once they start leaving, you're really, really screwed. It's the trouble with, what was it? Arcane Austin. There was that story that I believe Jason Schreier also wrote about the whole debacle of Redfall. Unfortunately, I'm sure we all remember Redfall. But basically what happened is that they had made Prey, and you know, they had, of course, the long history of Dishonored with the studio in Lyon. And so it was a well-accomplished studio and people wanted to work at an Arcane studio, satellite or otherwise. But because Redfall hadn't been announced yet, they had to keep it hush-hush. So they had people applying for the job that thought they were going to be working on like Prey 2 or Dishonored something, or what would eventually be Blade or something like that. They thought they were going to be working on something like that. But they apply, they get the job, show up for the first day of work, signing all the NDAs, and then they see what they're working on, and it's a 4-player co-op looter shooter. They're like, what? They say, oh, well, I mean, if the team thinks this is really going to work, okay. And then the person across from you goes, oh, no, like most of the team that worked on those games, yeah, they're all gone. Yeah, they left when we started working on this. You're actually taking their job. Oh, shoot. And so immediately morale, I got a new job at one of my favorite developers. Oh God, everything sucks immediately. It literally, upon walking in the door and seeing what's on the computers, you just be like totally crestfallen. Imagine how disappointing that would be. Imagine you get hired at Rockstar and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to work on a Grand Theft Auto or a Red Dead or a Bully or something like that. I'm going to be working on one of the best games ever. You walk in on your first day and you look at your computer and it's like, oh no, this is an NFT mobile game. I cannot imagine the disappointment that those people would feel. They go from thinking that they landed their dream job to realizing they are replacing somebody that got out because they knew that the ship was sinking, and now you're on here trying to keep the damn thing afloat. Like, I can only imagine the disappointment. But as a result, a lot of those people also left. I saw some of you guys in chat saying I would immediately quit. I think probably some people did, because they're like, I've been looking for a job. I'm right out of school. I'm in Austin, Texas. There's a bunch of other studios here. I'm going to go work in another studio. I'm going to take one of the other job offers I got. So I'm sure a lot of them did bail, you know? And that's the problem, is once you lose that talent, then the game comes out and doesn't work. It's not performant, to say the least, and it loses money. I honestly don't blame Microsoft for shutting that studio down. The talent that made it Arcane Austin left. They were all gone. Studios are not about the name on the door. It's not about the building it's in. It's about the people that are inside the building that make the studio what it is. Once those people that made the studio what it was, once they're gone, it's just a shell. You know, it doesn't actually mean much of anything. And that's been the problem with Warner Brothers, it seems. It's been the problem with a lot of these companies that have been pushing live service stuff. It's a lot of those single player, you know, people, they leave and they go form their own studios or work at other companies that actually want their talents. And I don't blame them. Like, I really don't. It makes a hell of a lot more sense, frankly, to go that route. But what about Rocksteady? I mean, all of that was about the Batman potential at Montreal. What about Rocksteady? Well, Buoyed by the success of Hogwarts Legacy, Haddad invested heavily in Warner Brothers' next big title, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which had been in development for more than 6 years at Rocksteady, telling staff it could also be a billion-dollar game. He and his team greenlit TV commercials and successfully pushed for coverage on the Warner Brothers' own cable news network, CNN. But Rocksteady, the developer of the beloved Batman Arkham trilogy, was admired for its single-player games and had attracted employees who knew how to make such titles. Pivoting to Suicide Squad, a multiplayer shooter, was an awkward fit that led to attrition and turmoil. Again, people leaving and talent leaving. Late in production, Rocksteady boss Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill, Jamie Walker, Sefton Hill, left to start a new company and recruited former colleagues to join them. They literally left when they saw the ship was sinking, made a new ship, and then brought over their favorite people onto the new ship that wasn't sinking and left everyone else behind to drown. I understand why they did it. I'm sure pragmatically it was the right choice for them to make. But I whatever respect, to people that I've never met, whatever respect I had for Jamie Walker, Sefton Hill, I lost a lot of it when I heard what they did. I was like, that's slimy. That's real slimy. It was at least the guy that was like the head of Firewalk, the guys that did Concord. He stayed through the whole thing. When it didn't perform, he resigned. He said, this is my fault. I'm going to go down with the ship. That's what we're doing, whereas these guys, they bail so they don't have to deal with any of the blowback. Ultimately, fans didn't have an appetite, to say the least, for another online shooter, and the game tanked. Rocksteady gave up on plans for content after the first year, ending the story with a hasty animation that backtracked on some of the narrative's most controversial aspects, revealing that the superheroes thought to be dead were in fact clones. Problem solved. Now, Rocksteady is looking to return to Batman for a single-player game, but according to people familiar with the timeline, the new project is years away from landing. So here we are. The Warner Brother Games debacle is yet another story of mismanagement, of wasted time, wasted talent, and maybe just at its core, waste. Just waste. They had multiple studios who were at one time, not that long ago, considered industry leaders in Monolith and Rocksteady. Even Warner Brothers Montreal was a very, very capable studio. I mean, they made Batman Arkham Origins, which is a lot of people's favorite Batman Arkham game, even though it's technically a spinoff. Like, they're very capable as a studio, as a team, but instead they pushed them to develop these soulless live service games, and they lost a lot of talent. They lost a lot of time, a lot of money. And now, even if they do course correct and they do have those teams make, or what's left of those teams, make single player games and make the games that they became famous for making, it's not the same people anymore. So it probably is not even the same level. It's just a waste. It's a waste. But all of this, hearing all of it, we might have a new Batman game in years. Probably PlayStation 6 era. It's if they're just now getting going on it. The Wonder Woman game is rebooted, or was rebooted early last year. Wouldn't be surprised if that's a live service mess and debacle, friendship simulator, whatever the crap. Warner Brothers Montreal team, they're not working on anything right now. They're working on a pitch and they're doing support for Wonder Woman. Like, it really is a masterclass at how to just blow a series of amazing opportunities. It's crazy, but to their credit, at least, the guy that's been in charge since 2015, pretty much since he took over, everything's gone wrong except Hogwarts Legacy. Everything's gone wrong. And he's gone now. He's out. So while initially you could say, like, he said some stuff that was supportive of single player games, his actions have spoken to the contrary. And the more I find out about his tenure at the top of the company, the more I'm like, how did this guy stay for as long as he did? Which, unfortunately, is a common occurrence in the gaming industry. Is this good news? I think Haddad's departure, his departure could be good. It could also spell for way worse, because if they replace him with like a mobile game executive or something, the former head of Zynga or something, then I think it just gets worse. I think they bring in somebody like that and they just turn everything into a mobile game. Everything gets turned into live service slop. So it could get way, way worse. On the other hand, they could hire like a former executive at CD Projekt Red, and all of a sudden they're doubling down on those types of experiences. You just don't know until you know. But that's why we're going to be able to tell a lot from who they put in that position, who gets promoted to take it over. Yeah, watch us to get Don Matrick again. Can you imagine? Man, that would be funny. They brought him back. We're bringing back the Xbox 360, everybody. Always online, no used copies. And the Kinect. All of our games are going to be on Kinect. Dude, that would be so freaking funny. He took my thing.